public wishing to speak to the Climate Action Committee may do so during public comment or may comment on agenda items during the discussion of each item and must be logged into Zoom. Anyone using abusive, vulgar, offensive, threatening, or harassing language, personal attacks of any type, sorry about that, or offensive terms that target specific individuals or groups will be muted and removed from the meeting. Please do not abuse this new way to provide public comment. All right, so Carrie, will you call the roll, please?
I will do that in just a moment, and let me pull up the roster so I don't forget anybody. Okay, Jerry Glazer, and I believe we just noted that Jerry might be joining us late as he is on the road and via phone. Alex Goodman. I do not see Alex here. Dina Allen.
Yes.
Joshua.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Kenna.
Here.
Lisa Pierce.
Here.
Sunali Siklan. I do not see Sunali here yet. Woody Hastings.
Here.
Diana Rich.
Present.
Kathy Ottinger.
Here.
And Sarah Gurney, I believe you noted, would not likely not be able to join us today.
So I'm going to share a quick inspiration today from Sue Monk Kidd from her book, When the Heart Waits. What has happened to our ability to dwell in unknowing, to live inside a question and coexist with the tensions of uncertainty? Where is our willingness to incubate pain and let it birth something new? What has happened to patient unfolding, to endurance? These things are what form the ground of waiting. And if you look carefully, you'll see they're also the seedbed of creativity and growth, what allows us to do the daring and to break through to newness. So that was something that struck me in terms of our work of so much uncertainty that we live with. And the act of waiting and sinking into that uncertainty being the place where you find the creative solutions. So hopefully we're all in that place of creative solutions or moving toward it while we experience our waiting. I will move on to the review of action items from the last meeting, which when I looked at my notes, I couldn't find any action items. So Joshua, if you thought of any, I didn't see any. Okay, so that was easy. And do we have any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda today? All right, not seeing any, we'll move forward. Do we have any statements of conflict of interest from any of the committee members? All right, boy, we're just moving through. So now we're ready for the planning department report from Carrie.
Thank you, Kenna. And I'll ask John and Phoebe as part of the planning team here if they have any updates as well. But I will start off by letting you all know that we did present both the Calder Creek Naturalization Project to the Planning Commission last night. I got a lot of good feedback and had a project meeting this morning even to look at that. One of those things we're discussing as part of that is the potential to do some green stormwater infrastructure improvements. As many of you may know, we did have some stormwater inundation on the Calder Creek Channel that resulted in an area of the Abbott and Petaluma flooding this weekend. And a lot of that has to do with some of the constraints and whatnot of that system. So we're trying to look at that in terms of naturalizing the creek as well as providing the stormwater capacity rather than bigger pipes, which is not really the best practice these days. So the next meeting on that will be December 14th at the Planning Commission, 6 p.m. for those of you who are interested. And then we also did present the draft local hazard mitigation plan to our Planning Commission, which is our advisory body for that. Once it goes, we have a 30-day comment period for that. I will post the link in the chat. I will note that some of the things that are in there do have to do with resiliency. So things like energy resiliency and making sure that critical facilities like shelters, cooling centers, city facilities that serve the public, things like that, don't lose power or are safe during a disaster. I went through the plan fairly carefully in the mitigation section to try to add in sustainable solutions. So where it said, emergency power needed via a generator, we've added in or battery backup microgrid solutions, things like that. If there's either an interest in this group assigning someone to go through that, or if there are people interested in going through that plan and seeing if I missed good solutions that you all can think of, I really appreciate that. The significance of this is that the mitigation strategies that we have, we will be able, once it's approved by FEMA, we will be able to apply for mitigation grant funding to implement them. So I want to make sure that as we're moving forward as a city, we're looking at the more sustainable options versus diesel generators, or one of the things was water resiliency in a drought. And so obviously you could build another well, but to me, saving water or saving potable water by perhaps having reclaimed water infrastructure is a better solution. It's sort of like the best way to save the cheapest energy is the energy you can save by just insulating your house in those small steps. So I will highly encourage you all to look at that. And I don't know if in response there's any, yes, Joshua?
Just what would be the best way to access that, Carrie?
Sure. So I will post a link to the document. If you do want, I'll also post a link to the Planning Commission presentation. It starts at about 7:20 or 6:20 or so, 20 minutes into the presentation. If you want to hear the consultant's presentation and overview of it. I just gave you the super shorthand version right now, but you can send comments to me, or there is a way to do an electronic comment as well on the city's website. So I will post that all to the chat once I get done with the planning report. And then Diana, can I hand it off to you for city council updates to the group?
Certainly. Trying to think specific city council updates that might be important to this group. We do have, I think, coming before the city council, I think we've approved the suggestions regarding filling of positions. And I know you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Carrie, but I know that Mary Gurley did put forward a list of the open positions that were approved at the city council meeting. So they'll be put out there.
Yes, thank you. Those are on the city's website, and the open climate action positions are the environmental justice and the second youth position.
Other than that, I can tell you that the climate action, that we have a group of students that is moving forward to do presentations on SB 1383, and which is the the provision that's going into effect soon, January 1, to require that compost be redirected out of landfill into compost. And we have a student group that is going around town and is getting scheduled in with the assistance of Sunny Galbraith to present at the Rotary Clubs, Kiwanis Clubs, and Zero Waste Sonoma. They're slated in there to inform. It's a 15-minute slideshow and then Q&A to educate individuals and the public about the organic waste requirements of SB 1383. So that's very exciting and goes to the mission of this group too. I think those are the only items that strike me as particular highlights that would be relevant here. I see Woody has his hands up. So Carrie, anything?
I was thinking the energy audit that was presented to council that came to this group, and then was at the last meeting, I think was probably the only other item I can think of.
Excellent. And Woody, is that what you were gonna do an alert?
Yes, that's what I was going to ask about. And I had wanted to be there for that council meeting, but wasn't able to be there. So yeah, a report out on that would be good.
Sure. So reporting out, and I do believe we had Lisa and Steve Pierce there, right, Lisa? You were present and made comments, which was wonderful. And we became familiar with an interesting, eloquent speaker, Courtney Klein from the library, who also had commentary on this topic. The final result, and Lisa, you'll probably want to chime in here, but the final result was that the proposal submitted by Dante Del Prete, our public works supervisor, was accepted by the city council with the understanding that the agreement, the actual loan arrangement, if you recall, there was a municipal loan piece to it. And then there was also a provision that had to do with the library that was of particular concern to this group because there wasn't sufficient information provided. And so those agreements are both coming back to the city council for approval. And so there will be an additional opportunity for the city council to review the details. Does that capture it, Lisa? Anything else you'd like to add in on that? Okay. Carrie, did I miss anything?
I think that's great. Yeah, that's what I was, unless you want to mention the special council meeting tonight. And I
Sure.
don't think the agenda for next Tuesday is available yet.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a good prompt. Tonight, we do have a special city council meeting. It was posted just last night, and I'll put the information in the chat. It is at 6:30 tonight. The topic is a proposal coming out of the Committee for the Unhoused, which is an ad hoc committee appointed by the city council with a specific prioritized task of looking for an alternate site for the RVs that are currently located on Morris Street. The city council decided to bring this, the ad hoc committee, decided to bring this on an urgent basis to the city council because an opportunity for funding and a partnership with a local nonprofit, Saves, was brought to us just Wednesday of last week. So that will be addressed tonight. There is a staff report. Clearly, there are environmental impacts from the presence of those Morris Street RVs that we can see there in what I personally feel are incredibly inhumane conditions. And the plan here is to bring them into a managed site that would be located behind the annex. Carrie can speak to the potential environmental issues that is next to the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation, but Carrie has looked into it and we've balanced the impact of a managed site where garbage and compost and everything else can be supervised against what we are dealing with right now. And so that's the proposal for tonight. Feel free to show up and contribute your opinions on that topic. There will then also be on the related committee for the unhoused a full report at the November 2 meeting, city council meeting, and that staff report should come out, I think, tomorrow. Carrie, anything else? Did I kind of capture the important?
I think that's great. Yeah, thank you.
I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks like there's some hands up. Diana, do you just want to call on people?
Sure. Woody, I think you're, oh,
Yeah, no, I was just lowering it because you were now.
okay,
calling
go
on it.
ahead, Woody.
Yeah, this is actually back to the energy audit, and I remembered what I wanted to mention, which was that, you know, I don't know what the dynamics were around that had it come to us, you know, with such little time to review it and provide comment, and it was pretty substantial, and it was something that would have taken time to review and very relevant to this group. So just a request that if there's a way to get things like that to us with a little bit more lead time, would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And that's actually echoing conversations that we had in the facilitator group with Joshua and Kenna. And yes, the tentative agreement, and correct me, Joshua and Kenna, if I'm misspeaking, but the tentative proposal was that an item of that kind that needed endorsement from this group be brought to this group at an initial introductory meeting, followed up by an additional second meeting where a decision could be made by the group, and probably in the middle there, a potential assignment to whatever working group might have particular interest in it. Is that kind of where we ended up, Joshua? Yeah, but yeah, absolutely right, Woody.
Right.
Keep in
And
mind,
that is super helpful from a staff perspective as well, because there are councils who don't want committees to see it until they've seen it. And so Dante and I were discussing and trying to get guidance for a while on, do you want it to go to the CAC or council first? Which do you want? And to know that this council wants the committees to see it as before and provide advice is helpful for staff.
and thank you, Woody, for that input. And Sarah and I both received that input, so, and Carrie understands it. And just remember, it's you guys are training us too, so we're learning. Thank you. Oh, and then I'm sorry, Debbie.
Yeah, just really quickly, I hope I can make it to that meeting tonight. I'm not sure if I can at this late a date, but it's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I've been to a lot of council meetings over it. I don't know if you know, but I have a warehouse on Moore Street. So yeah, so I have been in the epicenter of this for many years. So all I would like is if there's any information, if I can, give any information to the committee or talk to them or be involved in some way, I'd love to be involved in that. I've been an advocate for them. I know them all. I mean, like I would really love to be involved if you can send me some information.
Yes, I will send you directly by email, Debbie, that information, but I will also put it in the chat here for anyone else who wants to attend. And feel free, anyone, to email me if you want to contribute information, or Mary Carolyn.
I would say one more thing. I don't know what the makeup of the committee with the unhoused is, but I know my daughter is a doctor who works with them, and I think getting different community insights is really important, because getting to know them and being there is quite different than what we think being on the outside. So I'm so excited we're doing this, and I'd love to help.
Okay, thank you very much. So that's my city council report out. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we're going to move on to the regular agenda now with the research working group discussing the website proposals. Jasenia, were you going to lead that discussion?
Hi, yeah. So the only real point of interest that I have is I kind of have finalized the document that has all the resources that we do want on the website. I've sent them to Kenna, Joshua, and Carrie. If they'd like to distribute that to the rest of the CAC members or would like me to, I'd be happy with that. Besides that, we don't really have much else. Debbie wants to still look at logistics and stuff like that, and who's coming into the website and traffic, and kind of ask ourselves if that's the best outreach point, or if we should be putting our effort and energy into something more efficient.
Great, Diana?
Yeah, Jasenia, if I could add on to that. The one piece, so Jasenia has been very effective, I think, at gathering the resources that these working groups have indicated they want added to the website. And she's got a complete document. I will note that there are no resources, and Jasenia, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you've received these responses recently, but I do not see any resources provided by the finance and funding working group, nor by the education and outreach working group, and that's fine. These are resources that our working groups would want to make available to the public for the public's interest. But to the extent that those two working groups want to provide resources, we need to get those soon in order to get it finalized. And I see Lisa Pierce on behalf of the education and probably on behalf of both. So just wanted to share that. And Kenna, can we let Lisa chime in here?
Absolutely, please, Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have the sheet here that, and Jasenia, thank you so much for putting all this together. and prodding us along. So the energy and funding are actually together there. That's the first category. And the reason for that is that they're basically incentives and rebates combined with energy savings. So that's why they're together like that.
Does that mean, and just any, so does that mean that for the working groups, are those working groups combining, or are these resources that are just available to both?
They're just available to both. And that doesn't have to stay like that by any means. But, you know, when I was putting them together, it just seemed like, well, Woody's got his hand up. I mean, I'm happy to look at other ways to organize it. It just seems like they kept spilling into each other. So I just lumped them together.
Okay.
Did you have something, Woody?
I mean, yeah, thanks. I did just want to add that I do think that there are some funding mechanisms and whatnot that we're looking at that aren't simply incentives for energy related things. So I do think that the funding group will be able to provide some resources and information that's sort of in the category, you know, of funding, finance, and climate action. And so maybe Lisa, you and I can circle back in the committee and work on that and get that to Jasenia.
Sure. Yeah, there's various tax measures and that sort of thing that we've been looking at. But as far as, you know, resources for the public to access. So that's, anyway, let's talk later, Woody. That sounds good.
Great. Jasenia?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. You know, Lisa did reach out to me with those resources, so I just put them on the document as she requested. And you know, I thought if there was an issue with that, we'd fix it at a later date. As a committee, as for education, I did receive an email from Dina, basically saying that what they wanted to do within education didn't really have resources, was more oriented toward outreach and other things. But there was one thing that I could put on there for them, I believe. And then Alex reached out to me again once he got back from his meditation retreat about resources. And I have been meaning to email him saying that it's okay because other people took care of it.
Great. And Sonali, I see your hand up.
Oh, yes. Thank you for working on this. Dina had submitted the information from the compost drive. We thought we could put on the website like the articles she had written and, you know, what our committee has been doing and highlight that with pictures. And then I don't know if we also can submit things about rebates that like might not be funding, but like resources that people can access to do home improvements or upgrades.
Yeah, so I posted the link in the chat to the document that she has. And if anybody wants to look that over and if there's anything that you know of rebate wise or any other ways that maybe we should add, please let Jasenia know.
Also, I believe you can edit the document directly. If you cannot, let me know. I'll try and fix that. But you can add to the document. I really don't care.
Great. Sonali, is your hand still up because you have something else you want to say? Okay. All right. I think unless Jasenia or Diana has something else to bring, we're ready to move on to our next agenda item. So before we do that, are there any comments from the public about this website proposal? All right, seeing none, we will move on to our informational presentation by Bird Micromobility. Do you guys need to share screen? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to maybe introduce this? Because it's coming through the Transportation Committee. Thank you. It's coming through the Transportation Committee, which is myself and Alex Goodman, and Zeno and Jerry Glaser have attended some meetings and attended a meeting on September 21st, where we received a presentation from Robert Singleton, who's here today with us, waving his hand there, and Denny Rosati, who's also here with us today. Thanks for being here, guys. And so I think, so what this is a, if you've been to San Francisco, you've seen the scooters and or other big cities. A lot of times you'll see the scooters and or bikes where you can use your smartphone to unlock them and use them for micro mobility to get around. I think they have a potential for greenhouse. I think, and actually there's documentation that there's greenhouse gas reduction when they are used in place of petroleum-based transportation, cars and whatnot. So totally relevant to a climate action committee. And just in terms of what the expectations are, process, just this is an informational presentation. Just so we can share this, the Bird folks can share the information with us today, and you can ask questions. And then I think our idea for it, the committee's idea, was that we would probably have a period of time where if other questions come up, we can send those over to Robert or Denny, and then have a follow-up meeting of this committee for a decision as to whether to forward, to recommend to the city council to consider, having Bird coming to the city with their system. So I'll leave it at that and just go ahead and take it away, Robert and or Denny.
Great. Thanks, Woody. Appreciate that warm intro, and appreciate everyone's time for letting us come and talk with you all. I'm not sure if I can do a screen share. I've got a really brief presentation. I want to be super respectful of your time. Doesn't look like I can. So I can talk through. Oh.
Robert, I'm making you co-host, so it should be just a second.
Great. Thank you so much. Awesome. Get this. Okay. It's good. Thanks for having me here. Very much appreciate your time, Sebastopol Climate Action Committee. My name is Robert Singleton. I'm the Government Partnerships Manager for Bird, covering the Pacific Northwest, Rockies region, and then parts of California. And I am also, I'm originally from Santa Rosa, so I am a hometown Sonoma County born and raised kid. Went to Santa Rosa High, class of 2008. Actually got my first job working for Denny at Sonoma County Conservation Action, doing door-to-door canvassing work for all kinds of local environmental issues, like getting the SMART train passed, helping to clean up our river, and also helping to get our urban growth boundaries in. So I was exposed to urban planning and environmental issues from an early age. So I'm really excited to be here and speak with you all and kind of talk through something that I'm very passionate about, hopefully bringing to our community. So what is Bird? Well, as Woody said, Bird is a last mile stand-up electric vehicle sharing company. And our whole mission is to make cities more livable by making it easier to get around. And this is not only by using micro electric vehicles, but also helping to contribute funds and resources to more bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So it's really meant to solve your last mile transit problem, meant to get people out of cars, meant to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and overall make cities more livable. So where we've seen Bird started in 2017 in Santa Monica. And we started with this idea that if we could make smaller, easier, and cheaper micro electric vehicles available, that we could take cars off the road. And so we started off with 50 scooters in Santa Monica. They were just kind of off the shelf electric vehicles. And since then, in 2017, we are now in over 350 cities across 5 continents and recently completed our 105 million rides on our micro AVs. And as you can see from this recent report from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, the demand for scooter share is rapidly increasing and is now eclipsed bike share programs in North America. And if you look at the total addressable market in the world, we have 8 trillion car trips taken globally each year, of which 5 trillion of those are less than 5 miles in length. of which 900 billion are taken by addressable users in our target markets, with 200 billion of those trips being shifted towards micromobility or having the opportunity to be shifted towards micromobility. So if you want to talk about a transportation solution that can actually get people out of cars and can do it for a very cost-effective price without having to invest in new infrastructure, this is one way to do it. So how it works, it's pretty simple. You download the app, you include your payment information. You can scan any one of our vehicles that are usually distributed throughout a given service area. And we definitely work with our local community partners to make sure that we are reducing scooter litter and making sure that they are properly parked and available. And also we have equity programs and accessibility programs that make sure that they're available for all residents of the community. We then usually include a safety tutorial, make sure that the ID is verified. And just like that, you can go ahead and rent a vehicle and take it and hopefully get around town, whether you're going to, get a cup of coffee or meet up with some friends, go to the grocery store, things like that. These are meant to replace smaller car trips or get you to and from larger transit options. So the way it works is we start by talking with cities like yourself, either in smaller community or smaller committees or with advocacy organizations like bike and pedestrian coalitions. And as we move forward the process, defining what an effective program might look like, defining service area, appropriate parking considerations, community partners, local folks to operate the system, we will eventually launch a system at no cost to the communities that we work in. So this will come at no cost to the city. And the way it works from an operational standpoint is that we would work with either an existing company or a series of local entrepreneurs from Sebastopol or from a nearby community to make sure that we're providing an opportunity for them to have local ownership and local buy-in to the program. So we would license a fleet of scooters or bikes to them, and they would be the ones who are in charge of maintaining the fleet, of repairing the fleet, rebalancing, and storing and charging the scooters and bikes. And so, we have, because of this model of working with local entrepreneurs, which oftentimes can be a local logistics partner or even a local bike shop who wants to manage this fleet, we're able to service smaller communities. We even have communities as small as like Vernal, Utah, which has around 6,000 folks in it. And so that has allowed us to take what has typically been a big city solution and bring it down to communities of all sizes, excuse me. And so here's a little bit more information about our fleet manager model. We definitely have work. We're now in, I believe, over 180 cities in North America, again, ranging from size of 6,000 people up to your larger cities like San Diego, Denver, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., now recently New York, as well as and Chicago. And then locally, we recently we're on the agenda for approval in Windsor, coming up on the 4th of November. And then we were recently selected as the exclusive electric bike share operator for the city of Healdsburg. So we are already operating or going to be operating in Sonoma County. And I'm excited to let you all know that this Saturday in Healdsburg, we are going to be offering a demonstration of both our newest electric scooter model and our e-bike, our Class 1 pedal assist e-bike, at the Foss Street Trail extension opening. So if you want to attend that event, it starts at 12 p.m. At the Foss Creek Trail in Healdsburg. So if you want to ride some of these vehicles for yourself and ask any more questions, please come say hi. Talking about the evolution of our vehicles. So like I said, we started off in 2017 with off-the-shelf vehicles, but quickly realized that we wanted to design our own vehicles that could both be more sustainable, easier to recycle, much more safer in terms of having like the available tires that we have, as well as the longer lasting batteries and shelf life, better data, so more advanced computers that are on board in the vehicles that allow you to see a heat map of where people are taking rides, the length of those rides, and ultimately optimize a program that can get more cars off the road by meeting people where they are and addressing demand. And most recently, we launched our pedal assist e-bike, which again will be coming into market in the first quarter in Sonoma County and Healdsburg in 2022. So what is the local impact of these types of programs? So 63% of trips are directly connected to a purchase at a local business. So they definitely help to facilitate more local more local economic activity, and actually a recent study by Emory University found that for each scooter in a given community, they generated an additional $980 in spending to local businesses for a 6-month period. So in a community like Sebastopol, where you are definitely way more focused on local businesses, not having a lot of chains, but also having some amounts of tourism, I think scooters could do really well in helping to connect local businesses. Also, in terms of our fleet managers, they do make a decent and above livable wage. So our average fleet manager in North America made over $70,000 last year. And in California, that number is actually closer to $85,000. And then 26% of all rides are directly linked to employment. So these aren't just used for recreation and for casual trips. They're also used by local folks getting to and from their jobs. So it's an important commuter option and can be oftentimes more accessible, especially in areas where you don't have effective public transit or you're using the scooters and other micro EVs to get to and from mass transit options. We also care a lot about safety. And so that's why we're especially excited about the evolution of our vehicles, which, in addition to having 10-inch puncture-proof tires that are self-sealing, you also have onboard gyroscopic technology that wants to keep you upright. We also have such features as emergency autonomous braking, so that if the analog brakes, for whatever reason, sense that you're not able to stop, we can go ahead and naturally slow down the scooter. We also have, front and rear LED lights to make sure that you're highly visible. And then we also work with communities to make sure that we're giving away helmets and encouraging helmet activity. So things like the helmet safety or helmet selfie, which is featured in the left-hand column here, where you actually get incentives for rides if you can take a picture of you with a helmet. And then we're the only operator where you can actually request a helmet through our app. And so all you need to do is just pay shipping and we'll send you a free helmet directly to your door. And then I would also love to come into the community and give away a lot of helmets as part of any kind of opening ceremony or any kind of community event. Recently, Denny invited me to come and attend a wonderful event at the Barlow, which had a number of community concerts and stuff. And that would have been a great area where we could set up a table and give away a lot of helmets. So ideally, you'd want to work with Sebastopol to bring this kind of transportation option to our community. We want to partner with the city to define what effective service area would be, where we want to make sure to have the safest routes to and from given areas and high concentration areas. Using the data that we collect from initial rides. We also want to make sure that we're encouraging the mode shift to get people out of cars and kind of meet them where they are. A recent survey of our bird riders in California found that roughly 42% of all scooter trips replaced either a car trip or a ride hail. So this could be an Uber or Lyft. So this is definitely an option that is getting people to get out of their cars, which I think is kind of what we all want. And then we also engage in revenue sharing with our communities so that we're helping to generate more revenue, which can be spent on additional infrastructure. And we call this the virtuous cycle because the more people that are riding scooters and bikes, the more money we're generating, which can be spent on local infrastructure, which encourages more people to ride scooters and bikes. So, and then we'd also want to help work with local transit options. And because we're already going to be working in Windsor and in Healdsburg, and then hopefully Santa Rosa coming up in December, we'd also want to link that service area together so you could have a seamless transportation experience across all the different jurisdictions in Sonoma County. So with that, we'll kind of open it up for any questions you have. Again, I want to be respectful of your time and just say thank you again for having me. And I'm really excited to speak with you about this. Sonali?
Thanks for coming. It looks amazing. I want to find out how you found out about us, the committee, how it works in the rain. And personally, I like the bike assist because it keeps people active and has that component in it.
Yeah. So I found out about this committee through Denny originally. Denny's a longtime Sebastopol resident and West County resident. And then after speaking with the subcommittee, I believe Woody went ahead and recommended that I come and speak with you all. And being from Santa Rosa originally, I've spent a lot of time in Sebastopol. Spent a lot of time canvassing out in West County, actually, about a lot of environmental issues. Really love it out there. I try and make it out to Guerneville and Grayton much as possible every summer, just to go and spend and enjoy, the wonderful wineries and then the awesome nightlife, and kind of just that fun Sonoma County vibe. In terms of rain, I was recently just testing our vehicles out in rural Utah, up in Logan, in a torrential rainstorm, and with some of our new vehicles, with those 10-inch pneumatic tires, they actually perform pretty decently in rain, a lot better than you would think so. For certain torrential storms, we'd obviously want to pull them and provide safety advisories, but the actual really, you only see a real decline in performance either when there's a lot of snow on the ground or when there's a lot of particulate like sand or dust. But ultimately, they actually perform pretty well in the rain. So, seen a couple hands here. Let's see who wants to go first.
I think Deborah was next.
Okay. I believe you're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was coughing. So I have a couple of questions. One of them is, I'll just kind of throw them in and you can answer them. Average price, looking at like what someone would spend for this, and, distance, I guess, average price and distance. The other is, and I don't know the actual statistics on this, Carrie might be able to speak better to it, but I know Sebastopol is an aging community. And so is there any data on the typical age of someone who uses? Do we see elderly people? Well, obviously not too elderly, but I would say like what age range is most apt to use this? And then lastly, you talked about the entrepreneurs, which I could have 1,000 questions about that. What is their responsibility, all that, but I think to just quell it down to keep it simple for you, is that something that we as a community are responsible for going out and seeking out these entrepreneurs, or is that something that you guys do? So there you go.
Great. Yeah. So I'll tackle the entrepreneurs question first. So no, you as representatives of the city are not responsible for going out and recruiting those folks. However, we'd love your recommendations if you think someone would be a good fit and would like to do this kind of work. Typically, we do work with like local logistics companies, people who are excited or have either experience or the kind of commercial space that would make this more or easier to do. We've worked with bike shops a lot in the past. I recently launched a fleet with a fleet manager who is a family that owns like a U-Haul franchise. And so they already had the space and the vehicles that made it really just an easier transition for them. And they really enjoyed the aspect. And actually one of the members of the family quit their day job to go ahead and be a full-time fleet manager because of the, not only was the pay decent, but the work was enjoyable. In terms of the age range for folks, you would be correct in assuming that they do tend to skew towards lower age folks or young adults. However, that is not to say that we don't have a steady amount of usership from folks who are a little bit older. I have myself put my grandma on a Bird 3 and had her try it around, riding around, and she's about 73 and has an artificial hip, and she was performing just fine on the new technology. But it is something that I would say it's rightfully and accurately seen as more geared towards younger folks, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's exclusive. And in terms of, I forget what your first question was.
Cost, like kind of per mile.
Yes. So typically it's $1 to unlock the vehicle, and then usually between 30 and 40 cents per minute after that. And usually the average trip is around 1.4 miles. So you can assume around like 5 minutes for some of those smaller trips, or 5 to 10 minutes. So the average trip can vary between like $4 and $7. However, we also offer community pricing. So anyone who is accepting any kind of government assistance, whether that's Social Security or students accepting Pell Grant, or anyone who's accepting SNAP benefits or enrolled in any other kind of program, we have a blanket 50% discount called community pricing. So that is half off of unlocking and all rides. And we also offer for, say, if you're going to be a frequent commuter and frequent user, we offer monthly rates for folks, and can also enroll people in even targeted specific programs. So we For instance, I work with a number of cities that have like downtown commuter programs where people are enrolled in transportation demand management, which the city, we work with them directly to help subsidize the rides for those downtown commuters.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation today. On the cost, though, I'm just assuming that your time of 30 to 40 cents per minute afterwards, there's a station where they, a hub where they return it at that point.
So it varies. We have both docked and dockless models. So docked would be where you have those parking zones where you absolutely need to return the vehicle to a parking zone. We have the hybrid model where, you have some preferred parking locations, but you also allow the vehicles to float, as we call it, throughout the community, where you can park it in other parts that, aren't in a specific parking zone, as long as it's outside the public right of way and not blocking, like, say, an ADA ramp. We do require that all of our riders take a picture of where they parked their vehicle afterwards, so that we have a photo record to make sure that they're doing safe parking habits and not blocking the right of way. We do have discounts for preferred parking in those instances. So oftentimes we'll knock off the unlock fee so that we'd refund $1 back to your ride if you do park in the preferred parking location. And now our GPS technology in our newer vehicles is accurate to within 1 meter. So if you want to have a specific space where you want the scooters to go and incentivize them to go there, it's pretty effective at being able to manage parking that way. Plus, I didn't mention this, but the fleet managers are the ones who actually, they retain most of the revenue generated from the rides. So they have a big economic incentive to make sure that the scooters are being rebalanced to high demand areas, and that if there is an out of compliance scooter or a scooter that is in a place where it shouldn't be, that the response times are very quickly, because they want to make sure that scooter is going to be in a position to be have as many rides as possible.
I don't want to take up all your time, but how do you make money then if they're making the money from the rides?
Well, I mean, we do operate in, like I said, over 350 cities. So, there is enough to go around for everyone. And, we do see in some of our higher action cities, some of our vehicles see 4 to 5 rides a day. And depending on, where you are and where they're trying to go to, it does balance out, and the economies of scale do help us a lot. So, the more service areas we have in Sonoma County, for instance, the more that you could have 1 or 2 fleet managers have, a larger fleet, have a larger service area. It does pencil out for us. And so much so that, we're actually in the process of becoming a publicly traded company. That'll take place in about 2 weeks. So we're right in the middle of that process. The cost wise, and to be very frank, Sonoma County is a very high tourist area, and we do often, the high tourist areas do have a lot more rides taken. So,
thank you so much.
So we are running low on time. I'm thinking that for the remainder of the questions, if you could listen to the questions and note them down, and then just provide answers to maybe Woody. He can get the information back to the committee so that we can ask our questions, but have them answered a little bit later. Would that work for you, Robert?
Yeah, more than happy to.
Okay, so
notes now.
I will ask my questions and then pass it off to Lisa. So this is kind of just a lot of data questions. You gave an average of earnings for the fleet manager, but I'd love to see that average or comparison of size of town when we're looking at those numbers. Also, you said that the data, the age skews young, but I'd like to see the actual data on that of what the age breakdowns are. And particularly in different sizes of communities. You said 42% of your rides replace a car trip. A little bit more information about the methodology that you use for collecting that data. And if there's age data that's correlated with which are replacing car trips, because I'm a nurse and active transport is a really big public health issue. So if we're replacing walking with the scooters, then that's actually not a public health benefit. And then just so you know where I'm coming from. And then questions about the liability. We are a town that floods and we are a town that experiences storms. So if the scooters did fly into someone's window and break their business's window, or if there was a flood and our local entrepreneur lost their fleet of scooters to the flood, how does Bird support that business person with those hazards? And I will pass to Lisa.
Hi, thank you. So I'm sort of trying to get my head around how the finances actually work with something like this in a small town like we have, where most of the people are not just traveling around the town itself, but they're coming from elsewhere or passing through. So I'm wondering, you said there's initially no cost to the city. So I'm curious about that. Is there a cost to the city after the initial thing? Another thing that I'm wondering about is so many of our visitors here in Sebastopol are here looking at visiting wineries, they're drinking alcohol. That's one of the main activities in the Barlow is alcoholic consumption. And now, you either they're arriving in a car with a designated driver or they're on some kind of bus. So the idea of a lot of inebriated people hopping on scooters makes me a little nervous. And I just wonder, where would these people be going to and from? I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, they can't really take them out of town and leave them at their house probably. And then, so anyway, those are just some of the things I'm wondering about. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, and just one really quickly thing. Yeah, we do not charge the city anything. So the city never has to incur any actual expense towards maintaining the fleet. We do cover all of that.
Okay, I think is it my turn, Kenna?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to read through them. Consequences for misuse, damage, loss of the scooters. Who pays it? The manager, the user? What are the consequences? Is use of these scooters, of this scooter or e-bikes only available through the app? Are there other alternatives? Are you collecting data through the app? And if so, what sort of data? Tracking people, that happens to be important in our community. We're going to be presented with those questions. What is the percentage to the local manager? You gave us a dollar number, but what's the actual percentage that the local manager gets to keep? And if some of this is protected business information, feel free to state that in your answers. The end trip, you indicated a photo is required. What happens if the individual forgets to send a photo? The scooter just sits there. Are they ending up being overcharged, or is there some protection for that? Is there a limitation on age of the individual who can use the scooter? Do the apps, I love apps where there's a way to contact the person, your company, to ask a question or submit a complaint. Want to know if the app has those. And is it just scooters or also e-bikes? I see Danny is writing all these down. He's pretty quick. Just scooters or also e-bikes that you would propose in Sebastopol. And I point out that we do have bike shops that rent bicycles. So this is an important question for us. And then I will kind of reinforce the question presented by Kenna. We have a population of 8,000 people. This was also alluded to by Lisa Pierce. What is the realistic comparison to other communities where you've seen this system used? And then finally, we've all heard about problems with scooters in other communities, being left on the sidewalk, creating complaints within towns. It'd be nice to know how you deal with those. And I will pass it off to someone else. Thanks.
Denali, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what happens if it breaks down mid-ride, like similar to what Diana was saying, but yeah, just mid-ride, like if there's what kind of service. And if you didn't already mention it, I'm curious how fast they go.
All right, are those your questions? We'll move on to Dina.
Let's see. I was wondering about the recommendations for sidewalk versus bike lane. And does that depend on what type of city it is? Because I've seen these scooters and these kind of bike rental things in big cities. And I'm trying to imagine where somebody would be riding this scooter in downtown Sebastopol. So I was hoping that was something you could address later.
Great. Does anyone else have questions regarding this presentation? Either committee members or if members of the public have questions that they would like to add to the list, please speak up.
I missed the second part of Sonali's question. I got the first part about if it breaks down in the middle of the ride, what happens? What was the second part of that question?
Sonali, do you want to repeat that?
It was how fast do they go?
Oh yeah.
How fast?
It was how fast do they go?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else? All right. Oh, Phoebe has a question.
I was just going to say that I put some questions in the chat so as to not take up more time on this.
Okay. Are you going to be able to grab those questions out of the chat, Robert or Denny?
Yes, I can grab those.
Great.
Okay. Can I add a brief comment?
Yes, of course.
I just want to say thank you to you all for doing the work you're doing and for hosting us to come in and present this. I live at the south end of town, right behind the hotel, and I can imagine that that might be a place where there's a bird nest. And I'm slightly selfishly motivated here because I take meetings downtown all the time, and I'll walk to Acre, what's now Avid, quite a bit. But getting past that, children, weather, time, etc., just makes it tough to go more than the half mile, quarter mile. So I'm looking forward to hopefully getting these things up and running. But thank you again for your time and we'll respond with all these questions. Robert texted me and said he had some Wi-Fi problems and he had to dip out. So we will get back to Woody with our answers. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for presenting to us and especially giving that example at the end just now of kind of helping us see how people might be using that. So we look forward to reviewing more information that you provide to our transportation working group, and hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denny. And yeah, I just wanted to say to anybody who has, was asking all those questions, if you want to, shoot them in an email to me, make sure that looked like Denny got them all, but just in case, if you want, and if you have other questions you didn't think of, you think of something later, shoot them to me. I'll make sure Denny and Robert get them.
Great. Thank you. All right. So I don't see any. Are there any members of the public that want to say anything about this item before we move on to the next item on the agenda? All right. So Phoebe, you're up.
All right. Thank you, Kenna. So today I wanted to share with you all and get some feedback on the timeline and process for the Climate Action Framework. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see that okay? I'll present it actually. Is that good for everyone?
That's better. If there was a way to make it larger, it would be even better.
Ooh, I am not sure that I can at this point.
We can go to our view options and choose a larger size if we need to.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is sort of the draft timeline that I've been developing. The Civic Spark service here is 11 months. So that's why it goes until August of next year. And we're over here in October. I've sort of started working on thinking about an engagement strategy for the framework, how to involve the broader community and get their input on the framework. And there's some of the key elements of that reflected in this timeline. I'm planning on meeting with the education and outreach group next week and hoping to work with them on this and get their input. The next step that I sort of envision happening in the development of this framework is drafting an outline. So deciding on the key elements that we want to include and what the sort of solidifying the aim of the framework. And if we have time today, I'd love to get some feedback on that so I can sort of draft it and bring it back to the committee, but I'm not sure that we will have time. And then continuing with the community engagement, in the next couple of months, I'm thinking it'd be important to have a public announcement so that people are aware that this process is coming up and that the city is going to be creating a climate action framework. And going along with that, putting some information on the website about the process, how people can get involved. Also on social media, I know that the Education and Outreach group has a proposal coming up about that. So again, looking to work with them. And then in January, thinking about having sort of an initial community outreach to get sort of visioning input on the plan and what the community would like to see, what the challenges they're facing around climate change. And that could look like a virtual town hall paired with sort of an online survey, reaching out to community-based organizations to spread the word about this process. And then somewhere in here, also starting to do the content development for the framework. And this is somewhere where I think the working groups might want to take a lead on that, depending on what we decide about what the framework outline looks like. It could be that each working group could sort of take a section and start developing that, or depending on the working group and what the committee prefers, I could take the lead on some of those sections as well. And then looking at getting community feedback, potentially around the end of April, to feedback on the drafts and ideas that the committee develops. And then looking to get it to City Council around May or June, also being aware of the budgeting process that needs to take place around that time. I think currently there's a placeholder on the first meeting in May for bringing that to City Council, but I think that date is flexible. And then revision and final draft, looking at July, so trying to wrap up by August being the goal. So I would love all of your feedback on this process and timeline that I've laid out. If there's anything missing, if there's anything that you think needs to be changed, any questions you have, and then also your input on how you'd like to be involved in this, how the Climate Action Committee wants to go forward with this. I've sort of laid out some options, but I'm happy to sort of step forward or step back on any of the sections as the committee thinks best. And I'm also happy to repeat any of this if that was a lot of information all at once.
Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Lisa.
This looks really great, Phoebe. It's really easy to understand and to follow with the way you've laid it out. I'm curious about that last item, the transition activities. What's up with that?
Oh, sorry, I didn't mention that. That's sort of on my side of the Civic Spark. That's the language they use, just sort of making sure that the committee and the planning department is all comfortable with the material that's been developed through this process, and that you all are able to take it and use it going forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments, opinions? Diana.
Yeah, great work. So impressed with how far you've come already. Just kind of getting us organized and getting yourself organized is pretty impressive. This is for the framework. So there were two projects, the microgrid project. This is for developing a kind of climate action framework. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I did not include the microgrid project on here because that's sort of still in discussion.
Okay. When you look at this timeline, Phoebe, and the contributions that you'd need from this, from the Climate Action Committee, can you maybe highlight for us, just so we know of all these amazing things here, which ones require sweat equity, work by the Climate Action Committee to help you?
Yeah. So I'd love the committee to be sort of involved in all aspects, and I definitely want to make sure I have your sort of support and approval of what I'm doing for any of them. In terms of the work that needs to go into it, I'm hoping to get help with the engagement aspect. That will sort of the amount of time that the committee is able to put into that will determine how much engagement we're able to do, because I can't be everywhere all at once and I can't go to all these meetings, and so that's something more to discuss. And then also on the research and writing side, that's somewhere where I also can't do it all myself, and I think that the committee will want to be involved in that part. I'm thinking of sort of sending out a survey at some point to assess how much time you all are able to dedicate to it, and then that would help sort of set the work plan going forward. But it might be helpful to do that after we've sort of drafted the framework outline, so that people can sort of say what specific sections they'd like to work on. So that's something I'm thinking of doing, if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. I see other hands raised, so I'll take a step back here for a minute. Thank you, Phoebe.
Dina, go ahead.
Are you using that Sebastopol Climate Action Plan in any way for this?
The 2016 Climate Action Plan?
That's the only one I'm aware of. And yes, so yes.
Yeah, I have reviewed it, and I do plan on, well, I do think it will be sort of incorporated into maybe the background section. From what I understand, there's sort of some bad feelings surrounding that plan because it was challenged and lost its CEQA certification. So that's an open topic for discussion, whether we want to go back and sort of assess the city's progress in comparison to that plan, or if we want to move forward with the city's current goals.
Woody?
Thanks. Just speaking for myself, yeah, I appreciate this, and I would want to be, apprised every step of the way, receive drafts when they're ready, and help with, the initial community input in and outreach in January, and then going forward. So yeah, I just think that this is, central to this committee's work. So would appreciate being kept in the loop.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Dina, is your hand still up because you had another question? Anyone else have questions for Phoebe about this basic framework development timeline? And Phoebe, I'm assuming that people can also email you questions outside of the meeting.
Yeah, definitely. And I'd also really appreciate input on like the key elements that you want to see in the framework, and that can be now or by email also.
All right, Diana, you're muted.
Thank you. Others may not be aware of this, but Phoebe is already starting her outreach to various community groups and is lining herself up to present at Rotaries and in other venues. So I think that's important. She's already started that outreach work. My question to you, Phoebe, when you look at this timeline, is the drafting, and I think about community outreach, is the drafting of the framework outline something that you foresee happening really soon that would then be available for use by the committee in supporting the community outreach effort? Is that kind of the sequence?
Yeah, I do sort of see it happening soon, just so that we're all clear on what is actually going to be in the framework. There was some mention of it being similar to Petaluma's framework, but Petaluma's framework doesn't actually include specific actions it's in an appendix, not in the framework itself. So I think that's a key decision to be made that'll sort of help inform the process going forward.
Thank you.
Jasenia?
Personally, I'm wondering what kind of outreach you want to do and we are going to do. Are we talking just listening circles? Are we talking emails? Like, what levels of community outreach are we doing? What groups are we reaching out to? Like, who is our target group? Which obviously would hopefully be gone over in the outline. And just like, is this hybrid, virtual, in person? Like, what is your goal? Because when I hear community outreach, there's a lot of versions and a lot of levels of it. And I would like to know what your ideas. And from the outline perspective, I think that getting an outline would help inform the type of community outreach that we do. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll also be talking more about this with the education and outreach group. So what I have on here, the sort of initial community input, I'm thinking could be a virtual town hall, because I don't think by January would be able to have a big event in person unless something changes. And then also sort of before and after that event, trying to attend community meetings, maybe having pop-ups, tabling at farmers markets to try and sort of raise awareness of the process, and then also collecting feedback at those events, doing an online survey at that point, and then maybe in February or March, getting smaller group input. And that could be sort of listening circles, as you mentioned, trying to target groups that maybe aren't reached in the initial virtual town hall, because that may not be accessible to everyone. And I think that those smaller groups may be permissible in person, depending on the COVID situation. And then in terms of the April meeting, that would sort of depend on the COVID situation as well, whether that could be in person or virtual. And yeah, having opportunities for sort of online engagement throughout it, but also trying to attend as many community events as possible, and trying to reach populations that maybe are not involved in the government process typically, would be my hope and goal. So
thank you. I just feel that getting a more cohesive, comprehensive list of what who we want to reach out to and what engagement we want and what form that is would be helpful. But that will progress as this does. My only other suggestion would be to agendize what our goals for the framework would be within like the next month or so that we can all have a conversation about it.
Thank you, Jasenia. Those are really essential points. I'm going to ask Deborah for you to just keep your questions short, because we do have some other items that we want to get to. And I think it would be great to bring Phoebe back really soon to address some of the issues that are coming up, maybe inquire. So we will loop her back around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead, Deborah.
Well, we don't need to talk about it at this meeting, but I think we open a big can of worms about the accessibility we have to community outreach with emails and social media. So maybe, we're trying to define that. We have a proposal coming, so maybe we can help you with that also, Phoebe, once we get some answers. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. Phoebe, is there anything else that you want to say before we move on? I really appreciate your presentation. It seemed like it was very clear and gives us a sense of what the road ahead is and how much work there is to do for you and for us. Are there any members of the public that would like to address this issue before we move on to our next items on the agenda? All right, we'll move on. Working group reports. I believe our sequestration committee was going to report briefly. Is that you, Joshua?
I can speak to that, as certainly Dina can speak to it as well. In case anybody didn't hear, the compost giveaway was a great success. We had 6 to 8 cars pulled up at the pile almost continuously from before 9 o'clock till after 12:30. 40 yards of compost disappeared in about 3.5 hours or so, and everybody seemed really happy and excited about it. Dina's husband, Tor, was kind enough to sort of be a greeter and also collected a whole bunch of emails that people would like to hear more about this sort of thing. So far, so good. It's also likely with the upcoming State Bill 1383 that City of Sebastopol will actually be required to take a certain volume of compost or mulch per citizen next year. And so we're looking at streamlining and repeating this event potentially on a regular basis once that kicks in to help the city kind of distribute that compost, and more to be seen. But so far, it was really awesome.
Great, thank you so much. That's so exciting for it to just have disappeared. I know I didn't get there in time to get any. So I think
neither did I. So I suspect we'll all be able to take as much compost as the state requires us to.
Yeah. So the next outreach working groups PR proposal, I don't think we have time to do it justice today to really get into any real discussion. Does the outreach group want to say anything about that other than it's coming?
I think what I said before was fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So moving on to are there any other working groups that had something they wanted to bring to the full committee today? All right, I see shaking heads. Perfect. So moving on to the chair reports. Joshua, was there anything you wanted to bring forward to the group today?
I don't think so necessarily. It's sort of already got alluded to. We met with Phoebe previously and are trying to help coordinate her process and just figure out, how to integrate her process with the committee process. And it's all ongoing, but I think everybody's really trying to be connected on that.
Great. All right. So my one thing is that we are again getting ready for our presentation to City Council. I'm not sure exactly when that's on the agenda. I have a question out. Diana, you look confused.
I just wish I could tell you when that date was, but I'm sure you're on the calendar.
You are on the calendar, and if you give me just a sec, I should be able to tell you because I do. So we don't publish. We have a forecast, which we don't publish, but it is an internal working document that changes a lot. So yeah, by the time I can get it to you before 5 o'clock.
Okay. So if there's anyone that would like to present to council, I'm comfortable doing it and happy to do it, but I love bringing as many voices into the room. So anybody that wants to be part of that or take the lead on that, please just let me know. And it will be easier for you to volunteer for that once we know when it is. And then also we will be soliciting input from the committee members at the next meeting, presuming that our next meeting is before the presentation to council, about what it is that we would like to bring forward to the council besides the progress that Phoebe is making with the climate action framework and her timeline. So just in your working groups, if you can discuss, what is it that you would like council to know about the work that you're doing? And that would be very helpful in creating a useful and informative presentation. So I think that's it for me. Now is the time for us to take input from you guys regarding our next meeting agenda. Are there things that you guys would like to see us address at our next meeting?
And if I can just jump in, December 7th is the next update to council.
Thank you. All right, I can see you all busily checking your calendar. Go ahead, Diana.
My question is whether this Climate Action Committee would like to have the student group do their 15-minute presentation on SB 1383, whether that's something that this committee would be interested in.
Any opinions about Diana's question? Do you want to just have a show of hands? Like, yes, I'm interested. Is anybody interested in that presentation? I see 3, 4, moderate interest, 5. Okay. I think we have moderate interest.
Okay, so I will have the student who's in the lead position reach out to Kenna and Joshua about doing that. Thank you.
Perfect. And I'm sorry, my dogs are going to go crazy now. I think somebody had their hand up that they put it down, but go ahead, Woody. Did you have something?
Yeah, just real quick, I do want to have, I'm trying to speak over the dogs. I do want to have on the next agenda a follow-up to today's presentation, with answers to the questions, and hopefully us coming to a decision as to whether to pass this along to the city council, as with some kind of recommendation, or at least a recommendation for them to consider it.
Okay, so for the next meeting, you'd like to do that?
A decision-making item on the bird proposal, with questions answered and more discussion, and hopefully coming to a decision.
Thank you. Jasenia?
I would like not at the next meeting, especially if we're going to be discussing bird, but as I said, at some meeting in the future, I think that getting our core ideas and ideals for the framework would be vital, especially in a meeting where all of us are present. Oh, and I guess my only reason that I don't want to hear the presentation is because I've already heard it twice from Climate Action Committee, or not Climate Action, sorry, Climate Action Night last year, and from Green Team, because I actually know the student who is leading this.
Great. Thank you. Dina?
I'd be interested in us continuing with Phoebe and the framework.
Great, thank you. Deborah?
I'm just not sure protocol, since we didn't have time for the PR proposal today. Will that be on the agenda for next week? I really think to cohesively bring everything together, we need a framework of how to get the word out. Okay, great, that was it.
Diana?
I'd like to see us set aside at Phoebe's convenience at the time when she feels it's appropriate, given her process, a substantial focus on discussion and input to her to answer her questions. I think I'm just reiterating what was said by Jasenia, and I think also by Dina. I think it's important that we allocate some substantial focus time that leaves room on the space on the agenda to actually focus. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Carrie?
Sorry, just a couple of things. Jasenia and Sunali, I believe you're scheduled to present to our Public Art Committee next Wednesday at 10:30 for the Upcycle Art Project, to move that project along. We'll have about, I think you had requested 15 minutes on the agenda. Was that 15 minutes total or 15 minutes for your part of the presentation, not including Q&A?
Total.
Okay, great. Okay. We have their public art sculpture was approved by council, and we may be needing to be doing a site visit afterwards to determine where where each piece will be. So I want to make sure I have enough time for everything on that agenda. And then the second is I did send out an email about your desire, every person's desired length of term. I have gotten some emails back. A lot of people like door number 2, and I get that. That's where the 2-year term is. If you would be okay with a 1 or, ideally, if it's not a 1 year, which would be basically ending now, stretching to 3 year, if you'd be okay with that. If you can let me know, that would be great. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Deborah, is your hand still up on purpose? I'm going to assume it's not and call on Phoebe.
No, it's not. I was muted. Sorry, I'll take it off.
Phoebe?
Yeah, I just want to say if this group could have a discussion about the goals of the framework, that would be very helpful for my process. So I'm not doing work that is not aligned with what the committee wants to do. So if that could, as soon as possible, would be great for that. Thank you.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot of consensus on what we want to discuss at our upcoming meetings. So that's wonderful. And I'm excited to hear that so many of us are feeling enthusiastic about digging into that process. So, Joshua, do you have a review of action items from today's meeting?
I do. I might sneeze in here at some point, but I'm going to try to talk myself through it. Okay, there's basically several items which committee members are encouraged to review and or contribute to. The first is the local hazard mitigation plan, as mentioned by Carrie early on. Kenna sent out the link, so feel free to read that, send comments to Carrie. The second is a reminder that the research working group is trying to finalize our website resources list. So if any of the working groups want to add additional resources for the web hosting, that would be great. The third is that Bird Micromobility of Woody is fielding any further questions that people might have. So if you have more burning questions on Bird, you can send them to Woody and he will field that material and cohere it for our next meeting and hopefully for our next agenda. And let's see, on a similar note, working groups are encouraged to ruminate on what we should be presenting to the City Council in early December, and don't have to submit that at this point, but we may talk about that at our next overall meeting. And similarly, you might start to get clarity on basic goals and outline elements for the climate action framework that Phoebe is working on. So no burning deadlines, but a whole bunch of things to start to chew on and respond to.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. That was very comprehensive. So thank you all for coming today. Unless I see someone waving their hand right this minute, I'm going to adjourn us until our next meeting, which is November 10th.
Thanks all. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
I'm waving goodbye.